Tear the walls down! The ruthless billionaire developer roared from the kitchen above, his goons' sledgehammer violently splintering the door as they hunted me down. Arthur Pendleton thought he had easily cornered a starving, homeless 18-year-old orphan who had refused his $25,000 buyout for this decaying mansion. He had no idea the rusted iron lockbox he was so desperate to steal was completely empty. As I crouched in the dark, damp basement, my trembling, dirt-stained fingers twisted the heavy brass key into the disguised brick pillar. With a metallic groan, the foundation opened to reveal a vault of gold bullion, millions in untraceable 1920s bearer bonds, and the original deeds proving I owned the very land his corporate empire was built on. He thought he was burying me, but I was about to lock him in my great-aunt's tomb. For 3 agonizing months, the cracked leather-back seat of a 2004 Ford Fiesta had been Charlie's entire world. Parked beneath the flickering amber glow of a broken street lamp on the outskirts of Seattle, she would pull a thin, moth-eaten fleece blanket to her chin, trying to block out the biting Pacific Northwest cold. She was only 18, a girl who should have been worrying about college dorms and final exams. Instead, after her mother's sudden passing, her stepfather, Richard, had changed the locks on their apartment before the funeral flowers had even wilted. With $20 in her pocket and a half-empty tank of gas, Charlie was thrust into the unforgiving reality of homelessness. The turning point came on a dreary Tuesday morning. Charlie was utilizing the free Wi-Fi at a local public library, desperately applying for minimum-wage diner jobs, when the librarian handed her a forwarded piece of mail. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the embossed seal of a law firm, Abernathy and Sterling, estate law. Inside was a letter that would shatter her bleak reality. Her great-aunt, Beatrice Caldwell, a woman Charlie hadn't seen since she was a toddler, had passed away at the age of 89. Having no children of her own, Beatrice had left her entire estate to her only surviving blood relative. Charlie held the heavy iron key that had fallen from the envelope, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was now the sole owner of a property located in the secluded, historic logging town of Astoria, Oregon. It took Charlie 2 days of hypermiling and sleeping in rest stops to make the drive down the coast. As she finally navigated her sputtering car up the winding, overgrown dirt path of Oakhaven Drive, the grand illusion of a comfortable inheritance violently shattered. The Caldwell estate was not a home. It was a rotting corpse of a building. The 3-story Victorian mansion loomed aggressively against the grey sky, its dark grey paint peeling away like dead skin to reveal grey, rotting wood beneath. The roof sagged dangerously in the middle, resembling a broken spine. Half the windows were shattered, choked by thick, aggressive vines of ivy that seemed determined to swallow the house whole. The front porch was a treacherous hazard of splintered floorboards, and the heavy oak front door hung lazily off a single rusted hinge. Charlie stood in the driveway, the cold coastal wind whipping her unwashed brown hair across her face. Her chest tightened with a suffocating wave of disappointment. She had envisioned a sanctuary. Instead, she had inherited a massive, unlivable liability. Well, you must be Beatrice's girl. Charlie jumped, spinning around. A sleek, midnight black Mercedes-Benz S-Class had rolled silently up the gravel driveway behind her Fiesta. A man stepped out, his expensive Italian leather shoes crunching deliberately against the stones. He was in his late 50s, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that looked entirely out of place against the backdrop of the decaying forest. He had slicked back silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating pale eyes. "I'm Arthur Pendleton," he said, extending a manicured hand. Charlie hesitated before shaking it. His grip was uncomfortably tight. "I own Pendleton Development. I've been trying to buy this eyesore off your great-aunt for the better part of a decade. God rest her stubborn soul." Charlie crossed her arms, instantly defensive. "It's not an eyesore. It's my family's home." Arthur chuckled, a dry, patronizing sound. He gestured to the sagging roof. "Kid, be realistic. This place is a stiff breeze away from collapsing. The county has been threatening to condemn it for years. The property taxes alone will drown you, not to mention the asbestos, the black mold, and the crumbling foundation. You look like you've been sleeping in your car." His eyes flicked to the clutter in her back seat. "I'm a generous man. I'm willing to take this nightmare off your hands today." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a crisp, folded check. $25,000 cash. You sign the deed over to me right now, and you can drive out of here. Get yourself a nice, warm apartment in Portland and start fresh." Charlie stared at the check. $25,000 was a fortune. It was a bed, hot meals, a deposit on a rental, a new start. Her hand twitched, instinctively reaching for it. But as she looked from the money to Arthur's eyes, a visceral sense of unease washed over her. He was too eager. His gaze was too intense, fixed not on her, but on the rotting silhouette of the house behind her. Why would a wealthy developer offer $25,000 on the spot for a condemned, toxic hazard? "I'll think about it," Charlie said, taking a step back. Arthur's fake smile faltered, a flash of genuine irritation crossing his features. "Don't be foolish, Charlie. This offer expires when I drive away. The city will seize this land by the end of the month." "I said I'll think about it, Mr. Pendleton." Charlie stood her ground, lifting her chin. Arthur stared at her for a long, suffocating moment. Then his lips curled into a sneer. "Suit yourself, little girl, but don't come crying to me when the roof caves in on you." He got back into his Mercedes and reversed down the driveway with aggressive speed, kicking up a cloud of wet gravel. Alone again, Charlie looked up at the towering, silent house. There was something Arthur wasn't telling her. Her great-aunt Beatrice had held on to this ruin for a reason. Taking a deep breath, Charlie pushed open the hanging front door and stepped into the suffocating darkness of her inheritance. The interior of the Caldwell mansion smelled heavily of mildew, damp earth, and decades of neglect. The grand foyer, once a testament to Victorian wealth, was now a graveyard of antique furniture draped in yellowing, dust-caked sheets. Peeling wallpaper hung in long, sad ribbons from the walls, and the hardwood floorboards groaned in protest under Charlie's weight. With no electricity or running water, Charlie had to rely on the fading daylight and a cheap plastic flashlight to navigate. She found a small parlor near the front of the house that seemed structurally sound. She dragged a relatively clean armchair in front of the door to act as a barricade, unrolled her sleeping bag on the dusty rug, and spent her first night listening to the house settle. It was a terrifying symphony of creaks, phantom drafts, and the scurrying sounds of unseen rodents. Yet beneath the anxiety, a strange, profound realization settled over her. For the first time in her life, she was sitting in a room that belonged entirely to her. The next morning, Charlie was awakened by a loud, rhythmic pounding on the heavy front door. Adrenaline spiked through her veins. She grabbed a heavy, rusted fireplace poker from the parlor hearth and crept into the foyer. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "Anyone in there?" "Miss Mitchell." Charlie carefully pulled the door open a few inches, keeping the poker raised out of sight. Standing on the rotting porch was a young man, perhaps in his mid-20s, wearing faded denim work jeans, a flannel shirt, and a battered canvas jacket. He had a rugged, honest face, dirt smudged across his cheek, and held a yellow hard hat under his arm. "Who are you?" Charlie demanded, her voice tight. "Whoa, easy," the man said, raising his free hand in a placating gesture. "I'm Noah Brooks. I'm a local contractor and historian. Your great-aunt Beatrice hired me a few months back to do some structural reinforcement on the load-bearing beams in the basement. I heard she passed and saw a car in the driveway. Just wanted to make sure nobody was squatting." Charlie lowered her guard slightly, but didn't open the door any further. "I'm Charlie. Beatrice left the house to me. Mr. Pendleton already told me it's condemned." Noah let out a harsh, derisive scoff. "Arthur Pendleton is a vulture in a tailored suit. Don't listen to a word he says. He's been buying up historical properties in Astoria, bulldozing them, and putting up cheap luxury condos. He's been obsessed with this specific plot of land for years. Beatrice hated his guts. He offered me 25 grand for it yesterday," Charlie admitted, stepping out onto the porch. Noah's eyes widened. 25? For this? The land is decent, but the demolition costs alone would eat up his profit margins. He wants something else. Noah looked around the property, lowering his voice. Beatrice was eccentric, paranoid too. Toward the end, she kept telling me that the walls were listening, and that she needed to protect the family legacy from the Pendleton thieves. I thought it was just the dementia talking, but if Arthur is throwing cash at you on a day one, maybe she wasn't crazy. Over the next few days, Noah became Charlie's lifeline. He brought her bottled water, a camp stove, and helped her board up the broken windows to keep the freezing coastal fog out. In return, Charlie promised to pay him the back wages Beatrice owed him once she figured out what to do with the estate. Together, they began to clear out the downstairs study, a room suffocating under towers of moldy books, stacked newspapers, and shattered porcelain. It was during this grueling cleanup, on the afternoon of her 4th day, that Charlie made the first real discovery. She was attempting to move a massive, water-damaged mahogany bookcase away from the western wall. As Noah pushed from the other side, the heavy piece of furniture scraped across the floor, catching on a loose floorboard. With a sharp crack, the wooden plank splintered upward. "Hold on, let me get a pry bar," Noah said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Wait," Charlie said, dropping to her knees. Beneath the splintered wood, the floor wasn't solid. There was a deliberate rectangular void, a hidden compartment. Her heart racing, Charlie reached into the dark, dusty space. Her fingers brushed against cold, heavy metal. Grunting with effort, she pulled out a rusted iron lockbox. It was roughly the size of a shoebox, incredibly heavy, and secured with a complex antique brass padlock. Next to it in the compartment lay a thick, leather-bound journal, its cover dry, rotted, and crumbling at the edges. Charlie gently opened the journal. The pages were filled with elegant, doping cursive handwriting. October 14th, 1982. The first entry read, "Arthur's father came by again today. He threatened me. He believes his family is entitled to the Sterling shares. He doesn't understand that the wealth was never meant for the Pendletons. They stole the timber rights, but they will never find the physical assets. I have hidden the truth where the rats cannot chew and the water cannot reach. The house is the vault." Charlie read the words aloud, her voice trembling in the silent, dusty study. She looked up at Noah, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. "The sterling shares," Noah whispered, almost to himself. "There's a local legend about that. In the 1920s, a massive fortune in untraceable bearer bonds and gold certificates went missing from the town's founding families. Everyone thought it was lost in a bank fire. Beatrice had it, Charlie realized, staring down at the iron box. She hid it. Arthur doesn't want the land. He wants what's inside this house." Charlie desperately yanked at the padlock on the iron box, but it wouldn't budge. "We need to get this open." "Noah, do you have bolt cutters in your truck?" "Yeah, let me go grab them," Noah said, turning toward the hallway. Before he could take a step, the heavy oak front door of the mansion, the one they had spent an hour securely boarding up, violently shattered inward with a deafening crash, the wood splintering like matchsticks. Charlie screamed, dropping the journal. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the grey afternoon light, was a massive man, holding a sledgehammer. Behind him, casually stepping over the broken debris of the doorframe, was Arthur Pendleton. "I warned you, Charlie," Arthur said, his voice dropping its friendly facade, replaced by a venomous, terrifying calm. "I told you to take the money. Now, you're going to hand over the box, or you're going to join your great-aunt in the ground." Panic seized Charlie's chest as the massive man with the sledgehammer stepped heavily into the dimly lit study. Dust swirled aggressively in the air, illuminated by the grey afternoon light, pouring through the shattered doorframe. Arthur Pendleton adjusted his tailored silk tie, stepping over the splintered oak with an eerie, calculated calmness. His pale eyes immediately locked onto the rusted iron box, trembling in Charlie's hands. "I truly hate to resort to this, Charlie," Arthur sighed, shaking his head as if he were the victim of a minor inconvenience. "I am a businessman. I prefer contracts and neat signatures, but your great-aunt Beatrice was a stubborn, paranoid old bat, and it appears her insolence is hereditary. Silas, get the box." The behemoth of a man. Silas cracked his knuckles, dropping the heavy sledgehammer to the floor with a terrifying thud. He took a menacing step forward. Noah immediately moved, positioning his body between Charlie and the intruders. "Back off, Arthur. You are trespassing on private property. I've already got the local sheriff on speed dial." Arthur laughed, a harsh, abrasive sound that echoed off the peeling wallpaper. "Sheriff Miller is currently enjoying a very expensive fishing trip in Cabo, paid for by a subsidiary shell company of Pendleton Development. He won't be responding to any calls today. Now move aside, boy, before Silas breaks your jaw." "Run, Charlie!" Noah shouted, lunging forward with the heavy metal pry bar raised defensively. Silas was frighteningly fast for his size. He sidestepped Noah's swing, grabbed the collar of the contractor's canvas jacket, and forcefully hurled him across the room. Noah crashed hard into the mahogany bookcase, the structure splintering under the impact. He slumped to the floor, groaning in pain, clutching his rib cage. "Noah!" Charlie screamed. "Give me the box, little girl," Arthur commanded, stepping closer, his veneer of civility completely gone. "That wealth belongs to my family. Beatrice's father stole those bearer bonds from my grandfather, Thomas Pendleton, during the bank crisis of 1929. She hid them in this rotting tomb to keep them from their rightful owners. "If they belonged to you, you wouldn't be trying to buy the house for 25 grand, Charlie spat back, her survival instincts kicking in. She had spent months fighting off thieves in alleyways for her backpack. She wasn't about to hand over her family's legacy to a corporate vulture. Acting on pure adrenaline, Charlie hurled the heavy, crumbling leather journal directly at Arthur's face. As he instinctively raised his hands to block it, she pivoted and sprinted out of the study, clutching the iron box tightly against her chest. "Get her!" Arthur roared, swatting the journal away. Charlie bolted down the long, shadowed hallway toward the back of the house. Her sneakers slipped on the dusty hardwood, but she managed to keep her balance. She darted into the massive, dilapidated kitchen, looking frantically for an exit or a weapon. The back door was completely boarded up with thick plywood. Noah had done too good of a job securing it yesterday. She was trapped. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Desperate, Charlie ducked behind the heavy central island, an antique butcher block that smelled faintly of old grease and rot. She set the iron box on the floor. Her eyes darted around, landing on a rusty, heavy cast-iron meat tenderizer sitting on a nearby counter. She grabbed it, her knuckles white. "You can't hide in here forever, Charlie." Arthur's voice drifted into the kitchen, dripping with malice. "This house is a maze of dry rot. You'll fall through the floorboards before you find a way out. Just hand it over, and I will let you walk away. I'll even write you that check. Go back to Seattle. Go back to your Ford Fiesta." Charlie looked down at the iron box. The intricate brass padlock was thick, but the hinges on the back of the box were heavily corroded by decades of coastal moisture. If Arthur wanted what was inside, she needed to know what it was first. She needed leverage. Holding her breath, she wedged the edge of the meat tenderizer under the rusted hinge and pushed with all her might. The metal groaned. "I hear you," Silas growled, his heavy boots stepping onto the cracked linoleum of the kitchen floor. With a sickening snap, the rusted hinge gave way. Charlie ripped the lid of the box open. She expected to see stacks of cash, shimmering gold, or antique jewelry. Instead, her heart sank. The box was almost empty. There was no fortune. Inside lay a single, massive, intricately carved brass key, heavy as lead, and a folded piece of parchment. "Found her," Silas sneered, stepping around the butcher block. He snatched Charlie by the arm, hoisting her up with terrifying ease. The iron box tumbled to the floor, spilling the brass key and the parchment onto the linoleum. Arthur strode into the kitchen, his eyes wide with hungry anticipation. He looked down at the contents on the floor, and his expression instantly contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "A key!" Arthur yelled, his voice cracking with rage. He kicked the empty iron box across the room. "Where are the bonds? Where is the gold? I spent 10 years fighting that miserable old woman for a rusted piece of brass." Charlie, struggling against Silas's grip, looked down at the folded parchment. In Beatrice's elegant cursive bold letters were visible even from a distance. "The foundation of our family is stronger than their greed." Frustration practically radiated from Arthur as he paced the kitchen, running his hands through his silver hair. "Tear the walls down. Tear it all down, Silas. Break every floorboard in this god-forsaken kitchen if you have to. Let her go, Arthur." A heavy, jagged piece of the shattered oak door suddenly cracked across the back of Silas's knees, The giant man let out a roar of pain, his legs buckling. Noah had limped into the kitchen, blood trickling down his forehead, wielding the wooden debris like a baseball bat. As Silas dropped to one knee, his grip on Charlie loosened. She wrenched her arm free, instantly diving to the floor to snatch the heavy brass key and the parchment. "Run to the basement!" Noah yelled, grabbing Charlie by the shoulder and shoving her toward the narrow door near the pantry. They threw open the basement door and practically tumbled down the steep, creaking wooden stairs, plunging into absolute darkness. Noah slammed the door shut behind them and threw the heavy iron deadbolt, just as Silas threw his massive weight against the other side. The wood groaned violently, but the deadbolt held. "Noah, you're bleeding," Charlie panted, clicking on her plastic flashlight. The beam cut through the suffocating darkness, revealing a sprawling, cavernous basement with dirt floors, thick brick support pillars, and a ceiling choked with dusty pipes. "I'll live?" Noah winced, clutching his side. What was in the box? Please tell me it wasn't just old family recipes. Charlie held up the massive brass key. Just this, and a note. Beatrice wrote, "The foundation of our family is stronger than their greed. Arthur is losing his mind up there." Noah stared at the key, his brow furrowing. The foundation. He looked around the damp, earthen basement. "Charlie, Beatrice hired me to reinforce the load-bearing beams down here, but she was obsessive about one specific pillar, the main central column. She kept telling me not to touch the masonry, just the frame around it. I thought she was worried about the structural integrity. Above them, the basement door splintered loudly. Silas was using the sledgehammer. They didn't have much time. Charlie shone her flashlight toward the center of the room. A massive pillar made of dark, uneven bricks supported the main weight of the house. They rushed over to it. "Look closely at the bricks," Noah urged, running his hands over the cold, damp masonry. This house was built in 1890, standard bricklaying patterns. But look here. He pointed to a section at eye level. These bricks are laid in a Flemish bond pattern, but the rest of the pillar is running bond. This section was added later. Charlie ran her fingers over the Flemish bond section. The mortar felt different, softer, slightly crumbly. In the very center of the pattern, the brick had a strange, circular indentation, completely obscured by decades of dust and cobwebs. "The key," Charlie whispered. She lifted the heavy brass key. The shaft was unusually thick, and the teeth were arranged in a complex, multi-directional pattern. She inserted the key into the indentation. It fit perfectly. Bang! The basement door upstairs cracked in half. Footsteps thundered down the wooden stairs. "Turn it!" Noah hissed. Charlie gripped the brass key with both hands and twisted with all her strength. For a second, nothing happened. Then a loud, metallic clang echoed from deep within the brick pillar, followed by the grinding sound of heavy stone moving against stone. The entire section of Flemish bond bricks wasn't a wall. It was a solid, reinforced steel door, cleverly disguised with a brick veneer. It swung outward with a heavy astour, revealing a dark cavity hidden within the massive foundation pillar. Charlie pointed the flashlight inside. Both she and Noah gasped, the air rushing from their lungs. Stacked neatly inside the hidden vault were dozens of sealed, waterproof metal lockboxes. But it wasn't just boxes. Arranged on the top shelf were stacks of pristine, sealed glass jars, filled with something heavy and shimmering, raw gold bullion. Next to them were thick stacks of paper bound in decaying leather. Original 1920s gold certificates and bearer bonds, completely untraceable and worth millions. She didn't just hide money, Noah breathed, reaching in to pull out a thick, legal-sized envelope marked with the town's seal. He opened it, his eyes scanning the documents. Charlie, these are property deeds. Beatrice didn't just own this house. She owned the commercial zoning rights to half of downtown Astoria. The Pendletons have been building on leased land for decades. Arthur burst into the basement, Silas right behind him holding the flashlight. The beam swept across the room and landed on the open vault, illuminating the gold and the stacks of bonds. Arthur let out a breathless, manic laugh. I knew it. I knew the old witch had it. He sprinted toward the pillar, shoving Noah and Charlie roughly aside. He dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he reached into the vault, practically drooling over the shimmering jars of gold. Silas, get the bags from the car. We're rich. Arthur, you can't take that, Charlie said, stumbling backward, but a sudden calmness washed over her. Try and stop me, you homeless little brat, Arthur snarled, stuffing a jar of gold into his suit jacket. Noah caught Charlie's eye and nodded toward the heavy steel door of the vault. The disguised brick door was incredibly thick, designed to protect the fortune from fires, floods, and thieves, and Arthur had just crawled halfway inside the pillar to reach the boxes in the back. In perfect synchronization, Noah and Charlie lunged forward. They grabbed the heavy edge of the steel door and slammed it shut with a deafening metallic crash. Hey! Arthur screamed from inside the tight, suffocating vault. Charlie grabbed the brass key, which was still in the lock, and twisted it sharply to the left. The heavy internal mechanisms ground together, locking the vault solid. Arthur began to pound frantically on the thick steel from the inside, his muffled screams echoing in the damp basement. Silas stood frozen, his eyes wide. Without Arthur to pay him, his loyalty evaporated instantly. He looked at the locked pillar, then at Noah holding the heavy pry bar, and without a word, the giant man dropped his flashlight, turned, and sprinted back up the stairs, abandoning his boss. Charlie leaned against the cold brick pillar, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She looked at Noah, who broke into a massive, breathless grin. I think, Noah chuckled, wiping the blood from his brow, you can finally afford to fix the roof. 2 hours later, the property was swarming with flashing red and blue lights. True to his word, Sheriff Miller was out of town, but the state police had been more than willing to respond to a call regarding millions of dollars in stolen historical bonds and an attempted murder. Arthur Pendleton was dragged from the vault, covered in dust and screaming about his stolen legacy, directly into the back of a squad car. In the weeks that followed, Charlie's life transformed completely. The courts validated the bearer bonds and the gold, making her a multimillionaire overnight. Even more devastating to Pendleton Development, the discovered deeds proved that Arthur's company owed the Caldwell estate millions in back rent for the land they had unlawfully built their condos on. Charlie didn't take the money and run to a penthouse in Seattle. Instead, she parked her rusty Ford Fiesta in the newly paved driveway of the Caldwell estate. She hired Noah Brooks and his contracting company full-time, paying them double their normal rate to restore the Victorian mansion to its former breathtaking glory. Standing on the newly rebuilt wraparound porch, looking out at the sprawling green forest she now owned, Charlie Mitchell smiled. She was no longer the frightened, homeless teenager shivering in the back seat of a car. She was the guardian of her family's legacy, and her foundation was finally unshakable. Did Charlie's unbelievable journey from a homeless teen to a multi-millionaire heiress leave you speechless? This incredible true story proves that destiny sometimes hides in the darkest places. If you loved this dramatic twist of fate, hit that like button. Share this story with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more shocking real-life mysteries and hidden treasure discoveries.